No, the Idaho 4 case is definitely not going normal to what court cases look like, especially for death penalty cases. But Idaho just might be that strange of a place to allow the Bryan Kohberger Idaho 4 case to play out before all of our eyes in the strangest of ways as they try to make it seem normal. May ARHayes. It's Convict's Thoughts. I don't know, did you miss me? Been gone for a little bit, battling some health issues that many of you probably know about. The fight is real, but I'm not backing down. So just bear with me, because I'm throwing punches back every time the illness throws punches at me. I throw punches back, and we're making our way through it all. But trust me, I, like all of you, have been keeping my eyes on the various content coming out in regards to the case, and I've got to make just a personal statement. I'm not involved in any of it. I watch it just like all of you. I have my opinions, I have my feelings, but that's up to those content creators and how they want to not only present their channels, but themselves, and at the end of the day, it's them that's going to have to deal with the repercussions, or maybe they'll get to gloat that they were right. It's not for me to judge. So I appreciate those that reach out to me for my opinion and my thoughts. But to be honest with you, I have no comment. But moving forward, I do have to say, as we've all watched the Bryan Kohberger case from the very beginning work its way through the courtroom, and there are some oddities that we've seen right from the beginning. But even now, as we get to the point that they have changed the venue, and Bryan Kohberger caught this little plane flying most likely out of Pullman on the Idaho State transport plane down to Ada County, to where now he's being housed in the Ada County jail. We don't know much as of yet, because obviously his information is not going to be as public as it once was when he was in Latah County. You're most likely not even going to be able to know what classification he is, his housing unit. And we're going to see moving forward if they even portray this in front of the cameras like the judge in Moscow was allowing. Judge, remember him? The one that went riding off into the sunset, got himself the hell out of Dodge. He decided this case was not for him. But it's understandable, because there is so much going on in this case. I'm not sure I would want any part of it either. Whether I be on the prosecution, the defense, or even in the judge's seat, it just doesn't add up to a case that anybody wants a part of. It's a tragedy, there's no doubt. 4 young individuals lost their lives in a gruesome way. How, we may never know. We may not know the exact details of what truly happened, because I'm not even sure the prosecution at this point does. I mean, we've heard the various stories starting from the very beginning, when even the coroner stepped up to the plate, given bad information. To boot, right next door, we're watching law enforcement get in front of that podium, lying and being the worst of transparent when it comes to informing the community of what they were looking for, who they were looking for, and even what the crime was about. Who knew in that community whether they were safe or not? But at the end of the day, they arrested Bryan Kohberger on some very sketchy circumstances, especially based upon the fact that PCA just most likely did not warrant an arrest. But it got one. And the word came out right from the beginning just how unusual, supposedly, Bryan Kohberger was acting in his home at very wee hours of the morning, bagging up a green leafy substance, which to me, honestly, doesn't sound all that weird. I know people want to make it sound as if he was bagging up trash and throwing it in the neighbors' trash cans. I have a gut feeling he was bagging up a green leafy substance that he most likely smoked. I mean, I hate to portray it that way because so many people want to state that Bryan Kohberger was the perfect PhD student, and maybe he just possibly was. But I know some pretty intelligent, highly successful individuals that smoke a little bit of the green leafy stuff, and it doesn't seem to hold them back or make them a bad person. So if that's the case, I mean, I think we need to kind of wade off with the weirdness that all of a sudden the FBI and law enforcement comes tearing through your home in the wee hours of the morning. You just might have been awake in your home while everybody else was asleep, so you could bag your green leafy substance without all the eyes watching you. It doesn't seem too weird to me, because I do remember as a young man when my parents told me they didn't want to see me with any form of alcohol, even when I came back to visit as an older individual. I'm not saying I was legal age, but I was older. And I remember hiding those beers in that shoebox and sliding them underneath my bed for a little bit of a drink later out by the pool when everybody else went to bed. It's not uncommon. It's not unusual. But what is unusual is, why did the authorities feel like they had to make that grand of an entrance yet when they're walking Kohberger not only to and from the defendant's table within the courtroom where there are other people within the court, but also to the very plane that he's going to fly, the short 300 miles that most that are incarcerated that had to be transferred hop on a van shackled to other inmates being transferred. Doesn't matter if you're high profile or not. You don't get that special treatment on a simple road trip of a change of venue. Hell, I remember Jody ARHayes riding in the very van of 6 other people, 4 of them males like myself, as we would ride to and from the various different jails and take road trips from jail to jail in between court hearings. Yes, that's right. We even rode with females, and they were high profile. So don't tell me it doesn't happen. But yeah, I do see where people understand what we're visibly watching within the courtroom is not normal. I'm not saying that we should take away the rights of Bryan Kohberger to where he could wear a suit or attend his own hearings, because I believe that any inmate, any defendant should be able to do so. That should be their right. But it's not common. Just like it's not common that even before your plane lands from being extradited all the way from back east to the Pacific Northwest, you have a public defender at the crime scene before you even land back to be arraigned. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not normal. You don't even normally meet your public pretender, someone like Ann Taylor, until your arraignment, and that's if they even show up for that, because in most cases, you have to go to court to even be deemed eligible for a public defender. They have to have a hearing to where you, as the accused, as the defendant of the case, answer questions in regards to your financial capabilities. How was Ann Taylor assigned to the case before that ever even happened? Not only assigned, but out working the case at the crime scene, as if maybe that crime scene wouldn't even make it to trial before it got torn down. Who would have thought the crime scene's gone before we even get to trial? That's not normal, ladies and gentlemen, but like I said, we're talking about the weirdness of what we're seeing in the courtroom. Bryan Kohberger stood silent, which I have no problem with. I think that was a great move. It's not all that common, but it does happen. It seemed as though many knew it was going to happen even prior to it happening. Grand juries are typically very, very secret. So when it's heard that Steve Gonsalves could have possibly been approaching grand jury members to get information in regards to what they heard at that grand jury, that strikes me as not normal. But hell, it's not normal that a secret grand jury indictment gets tested the way that this one did in this case by Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger, to the point they even got the transcripts of said grand jury. No, that does not happen. That is very unusual. But it didn't seem to matter, even though they got it. Here we are watching something so unusual unfold as if it was going to play a major part in this case. And it just kind of went into the wind and disappeared, as if we saw the transcript, we heard there was issues, but nothing ever came about it because it was ruled upon that none of it mattered. The dismissal request was not granted. I'm not even sure it was fully heard. That's okay, because you know what really, really strikes me as odd, because I've been one that's been to a lot of court hearings, everything from status hearings to the different plea bargain hearings to the motion hearings. Oh, there's so many different types of hearings that happen in cases. And rarely is the defendant the accused. Someone like me sitting in the jail cell. Someone like Bryan Kohberger sitting in a jail cell at each and every single one of those hearings. Most times the lawyers can handle that with the judge without actually all having to gather in the courtroom. That costs a lot of money. Costs a lot of time. But in this case, in the Idaho case, against Bryan Kohberger, it seems like they have as much money as necessary. They could put on the grandest of shows. Could you only imagine what would have happened if the actual trial transpired there? The show that would have entailed? They would have held back no cost, even though they had a budget that they were far exceeding. But that makes all the sense in the world as to why, if they're on such a tight budget, when the change of venue happens and Idaho's hurting and asking the taxpayers to continuously put up more money for this case, they fly Bryan Kohberger. They fly him without restraint, walking to the plane, not shackled. That's not normal, especially think death penalty case, threat to society, aggravating circumstances to the point that the death penalty is being sought, and not only sought, being pushed for by the victims' families to the fullest of extent. Yet we watch a young man walk to the plane unshackled as if it was no big deal, just another flight, kind of like the one he took extradition back from Pennsylvania that happened on a dime. That was quick. Extraditions are not that quick. His was. And look at what happened when it was time for the change of venue. And here most of us were discussing, and I was the first one to step up to say I felt as though this was going to push this case back in time. It was going to take time for the Supreme Court to make its decision on the change of venue. It was going to take time for the Supreme Court to choose a judge. It was going to take time for the said judge to get acclimated with the case, and it was going to take time to get Kohberger packed up and in the dark of night moved from the Latah County Jail to the Ada County Jail, because it was going to be a high-profile move, and it could be slightly risky considering there are a lot of people out there that both hate and want Bryan Kohberger's life taken. But also on the opposite side of that, you got people that love and adore him to the point that they just might try to set him free. But it doesn't matter. We'll just walk him in front of everybody, and heck, we don't even need to cuff him or shackle him. We'll just walk him to the plane and fly him like a normal everyday individual. That's the way that we handle quadruple homicide suspects nowadays, and that's how we handle the death penalty cases that are high profile, and the change of venue had to be granted and deemed because of the risk factor to not only him getting a fair and equal trial, but his life was at risk. Remember, there were threats against the man's life. But that's okay, because Idaho not only has the best of security means, but they've got all the funding in the world. So we'll make this happen. We'll make it happen quick, and we'll get it done and over with. We'll get him in Ada. And now I've got this gut feeling, ladies and gentlemen, which is odd to me. I have this gut feeling that the case is going to move forward at a rapid pace now. We may actually be a trial before what was originally scheduled. You know, I had this gut feeling there was a possibility of a Frank's hearing and possibly even motions to suppress. And maybe even more than that, maybe even motions to dismiss this case. But at this point, I've got this gut feeling within me, and it's a weird one, that we'll be at trial before you know it. Maybe that March of 2025 that Judge really was shooting for could be possible. There's so much oddity going on. Even the victim's family now has sworn that they're going to be in the local area of Ada, even asking people to donate to a GoFundMe so that they could fly back and forth to the hearings instead of being that normal, typical victim's family that most likely makes the trip because it's worth it to them and it's mandatory because they go seek justice for their daughter. But this time instead, this could be a money-making adventure. You wouldn't want to lose that Netflix documentary opportunity by not attending the trial. But the only way you can actually get there is to ask other people to pay for it. I felt bad when I put up a little bit of reach out for help in regards to my health. And within me, it just doesn't feel right that other people are willing to help me try to get healthy. Whereas I'm not sure I could be a family that reaches out to help me get somebody put on death row and get their life taken from them, all while I push for a Netflix documentary. That's just not my style. Bryan Kohberger should never even have been attending all those hearings that we watched him attending. Much less many are debating on whether he should be wearing a suit to those prior to trial. And no, most likely not. It's not common for that to happen. I fight for that right because I believe he deserves that right. That doesn't mean that's what's common, because it's not. Look back at the various different death penalty cases, and they're all wearing their jail jumpsuits with shackles to the gores until we get to trial. And trust me, ladies and gentlemen, those people's status hearings and all of that were not widely broadcast like this one was for the money. That's right. This case so far, all the way from both sides, from the front to the back, from the ups to the downs, has been about the money. The big time money paid out by the major television stations, the major news networks, the mainstream media, all the way down to those that are just making a buck or two through the social platforms. I do too. I'm not going to deny it. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm not here to tell you who did it or what narrative caused it to happen, because I don't know. I, like you, am searching for all of those answers. I'm waiting to see the real and true evidence that this prosecution feels as though it has to try to prosecute Bryan Kohberger. Like you, I wonder if they have any. But because I wonder if they have any against Bryan Kohberger doesn't give me the thought process that they have evidence against anybody else. Because at this point, I think they're reeling to the point enough that if they had evidence against anybody, they would be trying to prosecute them. They want this case closed. They want this out of their hair at this point because they know how big of an issue this has become. And it's not going away. So we're going to watch, all of us together, as two sides of this will continue to unfold. One being, we're going to watch within the courtroom and within the system how they proceed forward against Bryan Kohberger. But we're also going to continue to watch and listen to the craziness and the narratives that continue to transpire through the social platforms like YouTube, like Facebook, and all about everybody, how everybody else could possibly be involved in this case. We don't know who's involved in this case, but right now I can tell you one simple fact, and it comes down to a very simple fact. Bryan Kohberger has been arrested and is fighting for his life within the Idaho court system, now in Ada County, to see if he can overcome the allegations against him. And that's what we need to know. Bryan Kohberger at this point is the one and only suspect in this case. There's no other suspects right now under arrest. That's not saying there's nobody under investigation, because there most likely still is that investigation going on. We'll see what that turns up, because as all of us know who have followed true crime, it could be 10, 20, 30 years down the road that we learn more about this very case. It may take that long to learn the truth about this case. But right now we got to keep our eyes and our ears open as we watch what develops for Bryan Kohberger, who Bryan Kohberger is not in Florida with his family. His family is not in Florida at this moment. I'm sorry. It's just not true. You see, those that continue to push the idea that they have sources and agents and various things abode that are feeding them all the truths that they could share with you, just most likely are getting fooled and tricked themselves. I don't have sources. I don't have inside sources. I don't have details upon this case being shared to me, like many of you don't either. I'm with you. We're searching for truth. We're searching for the justice for not only the 4 lives that were lost, but also the community that was devastated, the Kohberger family that is reeling from the very arrest of their son, Bryan, who to this day still claims his innocence, and I think that's key. At the end of the day, we search for each and every single one of them to get the best results when it comes to this case that they deserve. If Bryan Kohberger is innocent, he deserves to walk free and go home with his family without people accusing him and his family of getting off of the charges. If he is found innocent, he is innocent. But at the end of the day, if he's found guilty, then we have to realize that a jury of his peers heard the testimony and saw the evidence and made that decision. But until that day, I'm still going to tell you this case is not normal. But it's not also outrageously out there in the fantasy world that we got to create narratives that just are sickening and just not right. We seek justice in true crime, real justice. And we discuss true crime as it is real and it affects people's lives. I know firsthand, when I was a criminal, when I was a jerk, I hurt a lot of people. And I learned a lot from that to be able to sit before you today and know just how important and how serious true crime is. Let's keep our eyes and our ears open, and let's watch this Bryan Kohberger case to continue to see if it follows the footstep of the oddness, or if somehow it comes back into shape and we see a judge within the courtroom in Ada County take control and begin handling this case the way it should be. Will the prosecution be sanctioned for not turning over or possibly even hiding evidence? Will the defense at some point concede that the evidence is overwhelming? We got a lot still to talk about. I got a lot of fight left in me. I hope you do too. We'll see you again soon. You have a good night. Good talk. I'm AR.